This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
At Nordstrom, you can shop the best holiday gifts for everyone you love, all in one place. You'll find beauty favorites, cozy presents, fun ideas under $100 and more. Like festive dressing for you and your home. Experience the magic at your favorite store. Or order on Nordstrom.com with free shipping and returns. Need it faster? Pick up your order today in store. The best gifts are yours at Nordstrom.
I've missed you.
Season 2 of Julia, the Max original series about the life and times of culinary icon Julia Child, returns Thursday, November 16th. I'm Carrie Diamond, host of Dishing on Julia, the official companion podcast. Join me as I dish with the show's creators and creatives. Stream Julia on Max and listen to Dishing on Julia wherever you get your podcasts.
How thrilling.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, my name is Jimi Famurewa, and this edition of the food programme is all about older men and retirees who didn't really learn to cook in their younger years, learning to love and embrace it as they approach later life, and the real value that we can all find in forging connections in the kitchen and really discovering the joys of cooking.
Okay, so welcome back, friends. Nice to have you here. Now, I'm aware that
It's lunchtime, and in Lewes Community Kitchen in East Sussex, a group of men are gathering round a pile of onions and butternut squash.
We're going to add the squash, the onions and our lentils to 2 litres of vegetable stock and just cook it for about 5 minutes. Then we're going to add some coconut milk, cook it for another 5 minutes and then blitz it.
There are all ages here, but most are retirement age, and some of the men have been widowed. They're at a follow-up cooking session at the end of a 5-week men-only cookery course. It's called Man with a Pan, one of the projects run by Community Chef, a social enterprise that's been running for 20 years, which aims to make good food more achievable to everyone. Robin van Creveld is the founder.
My logic in this was quite simple. I used my dad as the example. So my dad is 82 years old. He's a capable chap. My mum has always been the main cook in our family. And I thought about what my dad would do if mum wasn't there. I think he would survive on ready meals and toast. And using that, I guess, as the benchmark, I was able to empathise with the situation I found myself in with a lot of these men. They might be bereaved, they might be carers, they might be living on their own due to a change in circumstances. I think there's a lot of gender norms which people have fallen into. People of a certain generation or a socioeconomic group, kitchen activities is for women. And men go out and earn the money and come home and there's a meal on the table and they might never learn how to cook.
Now, I don't know about you, but lots of people seem to have a story of an older man in their life who doesn't cook. We're talking about the generation that were born and grew up in the post-war period of the 1940s, 50s and 60s. Maybe they were never encouraged or never had the chance to learn because of the particular social norms that they were surrounded by back then. But what happens when a change in circumstance in your life means that your relationship to food and to cooking also has to change? I'm Jimi Famurewa, and in today's programme, we're going to be hearing stories of mostly older men who have decided to pick up a pan later in life and learn how to cook. Stories like Cliff's.
Hello, I'm Cliff. I'm 76. I'm a heating engineer. I do part-time work. My wife died, so I was lost in the kitchen. Literally, when I thought, what's all these packets and bits and pieces? I was never really allowed to be involved with the cooking. So here I am looking at a cupboard full of packets and vegetables and thinking, what do I do? What do I do? So my cooking experience it's completely changed. I'm no longer frightened to have a go at something. And if it doesn't turn out, you learn why it hasn't turned out, so you can have another go. You're in a company of people of all, not all, but majority are in the same situation. Their wives or partners have died or whatever the situation. And there you are in a kitchen And it's like being in a tool shop and never use any of the tools. So you've got to learn. And it's wonderful because we laugh at the mistakes and we just have little jokes. And we say, what did you do this week? And I say, oh, I made a rice pudding, but it came out like a brick. So you say, what did I do wrong? Well, they'll tell you what you did wrong. And you think, I'll have another go then. And it's a progress and it's fun. I'm not afraid to open the cupboard now.
We'll hear more from Cliff, Robin and the gents on the Man with a Pan course later in the programme. And there have been reports from cookery schools around the country that more older men are signing up for courses and workshops. This was definitely the case for a weekly cooking session that I went to join in North London, run by Age UK Barnet.
Welcome everyone. So today we're going to make burgers, we're going to have sausages, we're going to have a coleslaw with a burger. We're also going to have veggie burgers, and as a dessert we're going to have campfire cupcakes.
This is a mixed group, open to absolutely everyone. But as is the case most weeks, the majority of the participants that have come today are men. Age UK Barnet also have a men-only class that runs weekly in term time. The main focus of these groups is cooking and eating together as a social and learning experience. And when I arrived at a busy community centre in East Finchley, the group had just tied on their aprons, finished trading jokes and gathered around a table, ready to start measuring out baking ingredients for one of the day's 2 dishes. Stacey Canalick runs the classes.
They saw a need in men were ending up as carers for their wives, and because of the age group, they'd never cooked before. These gentlemen are, certainly the ones that are 70 plus, don't really cook ever. So it's definitely a generational impact. Yeah. You know, if they never did food at home tech at school, and they were struggling with that. They're also struggling with loneliness. They don't talk to each other. They don't have the social connections really that women do. So they've found that it's really brought them together, and they found that the men bonded. It's made a big difference. If you can just make a meal for your wife if she's poorly, that's a real achievement rather than just putting it in the microwave. That's what we do. That's what we do.
Obviously, it's an especially challenging time financially, but you've managed to make this sustainable. How have you managed to do that?
It's a challenge. It's a challenge. We rely heavily on our volunteers. They devise the recipes, and we have to charge our participants. Nothing's wasted, and they're really good at keeping to a budget.
So my name is Anne Ayachi. I'm a healthy lifestyle coach. Here at Age UK, a lot of the people that come here have stopped cooking or never cooked in their life because their other half used to cook. And it's important to learn easy recipes that are healthy and they can replicate at home.
What kind of skill level is there normally? Is there a range of abilities?
I mean, some guys are great at chopping onions. Some just have no clue even where to start. So it's really nice to see that they become confident. It's about making them realize that, recipe is great, but you can try different things as well. And that's great when they come and say, I made it this way at home.
Oh, sorry, Andrew Scott. Now, before I came here, I probably haven't cooked for about 10 years since my late wife died. Generally eating from Marks and Spencer's takeaway ready-made foods. But I started trying to cook now, making myself homemade curries and things.
What was it for you that had prevented you from cooking that much previously? Was it just purely that there was no need?
My wife would always do the cooking, but no, I wasn't taught to cook as a child. Brought up in the age where my mother did all the cooking and that was it. The main reason why I came here originally was, I suppose, a bit of loneliness. Being at home by myself, having retired now, and now I'm starting to cook. My daughter, who doesn't live far away, she generally sort of phone out, come around and eat with us. Well, the other week, for the first time, I phoned her up and said, come along and eat with me. And I just cooked a pasta bake. I felt immensely proud that I'd actually done it.
That's fantastic. I wonder, how do you reflect on all those years where you were almost prevented from cooking or it wasn't expected?
A complete waste of time. I always had the time to be able to do it, but just never did.
Butter and sugar? Nah, maybe not.
Maybe not, yeah. My name is Brian. I come here because I find it therapeutic. I was in a rut and I thought I've got to start doing things, start going out. I love cooking. I do a lot of cooking at home. My grandson loves my chicken korma. We get the children to join in as well, especially if you've got two daughters. We, my wife in particular, taught them how to cook. So it all goes down in generations. If you stop doing it, then that's when things collapse.
So everybody has finished the cooking and everything's been packed away, and now everybody is sitting down, tucking into plates of burgers and coleslaw. Yeah, it's just a real communal meal.
Yeah, my name's Eric. I lost my partner in 2010. I enjoyed cooking. My partner was a very good cook, so I tended to take pretty much a back seat. I wanted some sort of structure to get me out the house. I met a whole new group of people, very different. It was a wonderful experience because it gives you confidence here. And I think they've done a wonderful job. I really do. I mean, the fact that it's still going after 10 years has to say something, doesn't it?
Yeah. Obviously, it does feel as though men of a certain generation have a particular relationship with cooking a lot of the time, and that's because of the time you grew up in and you weren't necessarily encouraged to learn how to cook, or the kitchen was off limits. Does that ring true for you, or did you have a different experience?
I was lucky. I went away to college in the 60s, and I think if you left home, you either sank or swam. You've actually had to learn to cook. I can remember sharing a flat with guys from Manchester, and their signature dishes were sugar sandwiches and potato pie. I think it was fortunate. I think for people who never left home, it's very, very difficult. And there were guys here who've been living off ready meals for years. I think what you're saying is traditionally, there was seeing that a woman's role was very much that. And I think a lot of men didn't want to encroach, and a lot of women didn't want them to encroach. But there were probably some women who would have welcomed it. It's sort of like a conversation you need to have. Shall I cook this week? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. A lot of men now are very good cooks, especially if you've got two people in a relationship and they're both working and they've got children. I think it's got to be 50-50, hasn't it?
Andrew, Brian and Eric in East Finchley on learning or rediscovering cooking later in life. And as you heard, they all had varied experiences of cooking growing up. So what was going on in those post-war years socially that led to this broad trend of 70-plus-year-old men not always being confident in the kitchen? This is Anne Murcutt, a sociologist who since the 1970s has published many books and academic papers on various aspects of food and society.
There's quite a lot of factors involved. One is the very well-known one of, depending how you put it, of women being pushed back into the kitchen. After all, across Europe and into the States, World War II sucked women out of the home and into war work, into factories particularly. And then, of course, what happens is when the war's over, suddenly there's an influx of labour. In other words, the men returning from the war need a job. And that was a period when the idea was that the men earned the income for the family. And this was a time when there was not only the shift from producing materials or goods for the war effort to try and find domestic, i.e. consumer markets. It was also matched with this, women, they can now spend time and effort and attention to making the home lovely, to having a most wonderful kitchen. And there are plenty of photographs supporting women's return to the home with beautiful looking kitchens with mod cons dating from the 1950s. It was a period when there's a lot of technological developments. There were all kinds of things which made life more convenient in the kitchen, less heavy labour, less heavy drudgery. They were an aspiration put in front of people. So women were back in the kitchen, and to some extent, men were sort of pushed out. They didn't need to cook, although, of course, a lot of men who'd been in the forces knew perfectly well how to put food together, because otherwise they couldn't have survived. There was a sense in which men were almost pushed out of the kitchen, or indeed glad to leave it. So that's the world in which 70-year-olds, 60 and 70-year-olds now were brought up in.
Anne Murcutt. By the time I was a teenager with a growing interest in cooking, the food landscape had shifted significantly. In the late 1990s, male TV chefs like Jamie Oliver had come banister sliding onto the scene and presented cooking ability as something that was not just the valuable tool that every young man needed in his arsenal. It was a desirable mark of status, worldliness, and self-sufficiency. What's more, as a British Nigerian, I became anecdotally aware of similar, nuanced differences within the black British community when it came to men and cooking. Yes, African and Caribbean heritage men of a post-war vintage may not have done the majority of the day-to-day meal preparing in their households, but there were often signs of secret proficiency in the kitchen, be it through celebratory feasts, meticulously seasoned stews, or masterful commandeering of the barbecue. To dig into this a bit more, I called my friend Viv Thompson, dad of food writer Melissa Thompson, to hear about his experience.
Hello everyone, I am Vivian Thompson. I'm 67-year-old, born in Jamaica, lived in England since I was 10-year-old. I spent many years in the Royal Navy and I've been retired since 2013. In the Jamaican family, especially where we lived in Darlington, there were 6 or 8 families that lived up the same street. Say Jamaican, we could go to anybody's house. As soon as you walked in the house, it was food. Are you hungry? Have you eaten? You would have gorgeous curries and, proper Jamaican food. It wasn't a woman's job to cook. It was anybody's. My father would cook. My mother would cook. My uncle up the road, he would cook. His wife would cook. My journey into food, I was 13-year-old. Both my parents were at work and they worked very hard. They had to feed and clothe 7 of us, 7 children. One day I was reading a brown cookery book. I'm not sure if it was Mrs. Beaton or Good Housekeeping. So I know now, and for a few years, that it was a rib of beef. But there was this thing in the book, and there it was in the freezer. I read the recipe for it. I took it out. I think I defrosted it in hot water. And I cooked it. Before my parents came home, I'd fed my 3 brothers and 3 sisters. And then when my mother came home, I put it on the table, served her some. She could not believe that I had cooked it. And she absolutely loved it, and that was a big boost to me, to my whole confidence, in life. And that gave me the impetus really to just carry on cooking.
That idea that there was an expectation and an onus on everyone to cook, regardless of gender, is really fascinating. And is this something that you've seen and that you recognise in other people who you have that shared lineage and heritage with, that it is a kind of recognisable trait, particularly in terms of men and cooking?
I cooked a lot at home. And I think as Jamaicans, you knew how to look after yourself. You didn't have to wait for someone to come and look after you. Most of the men and boys, even young boys, would be very happy to go in the kitchen and cook up something.
Yeah.
It was something that, something that we all did. Let's take my parents, for instance. When they came here, there was a few white English families that actually helped them to settle. So what they had to do was then to cook something Caribbean to get them into the Caribbean food culture. That has worked very, very well.
And I guess when you're cooking food from your culture as well, you're communicating something about who you are, where you come from, and it kind of opens up those conversations.
Integration, you mix through food and the enjoyment of food. It just made me realize, from watching what my parents did, that, that is very important. It's made me, from very early in our marriage, my wife and I would be having dinner parties, getting our friends round, just get the people together. So it's something that I continued.
Viv Thompson. If they don't have a family network close by and live alone, social isolation can be a massive factor in how men look after themselves, with knock-on effects for mental health. Using food as a tool to help tackle loneliness with men forms the basis of Men's Pie Club, a network of clubs in and around Newcastle and Leeds, which gets guys in a room once a week to make a pie, connect and meet people. Here's the co-founder, Jamie Sadler, and chief pie man, Chris Smith, who manages the clubs.
There's been quite a lot of research which has basically outlined how guys, as we get older, we're not brilliant at keeping up social connections, and we're not happy with the level of connection that we keep up. And there's a strong kind of link between social isolation and issues related to your mental health, whether it be depression, anxiety, and of course, worst of all, suicide as well. They were the key drivers to us setting up Men's Pie Club.
There's something about pies that seems accessible, seems achievable, seems alluring to all people, but to men in particular.
No, completely. And, you know, day one with Pie Club, we've always said we know guys that maybe don't like football, don't like rugby, don't like golf, cricket, but we don't know many guys that don't like a pie. We've just, I don't know, hit on something and people get it and the guys get it. You know, in terms of the way that Pie Club works, one of the first jobs is for everybody to sit around the table and make their pastry. So if you can imagine 10 guys rubbing butter into flour, having a catch up about what their week has been like and just, you know, being present in that moment, it's a beautiful thing. And I think doing that together is incredibly powerful and just really encouraging conversation, encouraging that communal feeling, getting that confidence to be able to create something and then using that as the spark, as the catalyst to start experimenting with other foods as well. And then applying, thinking about the well-being aspect, the health aspect, and the positive impact that food can have on your life. You know, it can be incredibly powerful.
Chris, what would you say are some of the stories you're hearing and the reasons for men finding themselves in these situations?
I think there's a lot of male traits, stereotypically male traits, stoicism being one, unwillingness to show vulnerability or to reach out. And maybe guys need a focus, they need another task to be going on when the important conversations happen. And I think that's what Pie Club does. One of our members summed it up perfectly and he described it as a brotherhood. We see and we hear amazing stories every day, but I think there's a few that stand out to me personally, certainly from the past few months. One guy in particular came to the Men's Pie Club, you know, quite low on confidence, quite reserved, but we've seen this guy, you know, over the last year or so really grow into a position of more responsibility within the club, really leading Men's Pie Club from within. Obviously, that's ideal. That's 100% what we want.
Jamie Sadler and Chris Smith from Men's Pie Club, who are hoping to expand the work across the North East and beyond that, hopefully, the rest of the UK. Let's return to the Man with a Pan cookery course, run by community chef CIC. Since the project began 6 years ago, Robin van Creveld and his team have run the course around Kent, Surrey and Sussex, working with over 1,000 men so far.
The Man with the Pan courses were offering more than just the opportunity to learn to cook. They were offering men the opportunity to be together with other men, to share what goes on for them, to offer peer support. Men of a certain generation might bottle up some of the emotive stuff that comes up for them. They seem to talk to each other and open up a little bit more in the same gender environment. It's not only about the age, though, because we've run very multi-generational sessions. If you imagine a big age range in the room, and I think that does a lot for community development. It does a lot for helping people to empathise with the older generation, to understand the younger generation. So in an ideal world, I think our elders are held within the family, but we're not in an ideal world. And I think that any activities that get people doing life-affirming, positive activities are going to help people to age happily and gracefully. If we look at mental health statistics, there's very few stats on mental health for men over the age of 60. Whereas we hear all about statins, we hear all about high cholesterol. And a key part of what we're trying to do with Community Chef is change the narrative. We're a social enterprise because we don't want to be entirely reliant on grants. You know, our work is charitable, but we're also a business because in these waters that we swim in, you have to be resilient, you have to be agile. And what we've seen in the last 12 years is those handouts disseminated through local councils, through third sector organisations have gone down and down and down. If I were in a position of government or a position of a local council, I would be not throwing money, I would be investing money in activities that get people cooking and eating together. I think that it doesn't just provide basic nutrition for people. What we're doing with Man with a Pan is providing a social network for people, which helps them to feel supported, helps them to feel like they're not alone in this world. And at the end of the day, it's a lonely old world out there. And the more we come together, the easier things are going to be.
While the butternut squash and lentil soup simmered on the stove, the gents on the course sat down to share their experiences of getting to grips with cooking.
I'm Michael. I was up until May looking after my wife for the last 11 years. I came along to here, I saw it advertised in Care for the Carers, and it was an opportunity for me to have a break from home and this trauma of all that lot, and be amongst people with similar problems. So it's been good, and I've been doing this for the last, sorry, can't help it, I'm just emotional. So for the last 2 years I've been doing it, and done a couple of these courses more than once, and it's just good fun. You're amongst people with similar situations, some worse than me, some not as bad. But, you've still got to look after yourself. So I still continue to cook a meal. And if I do shepherd's pie, I end up with 8 portions, 7 of which go in the freezer. So I still bulk cook, but I do need to look after my health. It's very easy sometimes to think, I won't bother tonight, but I'll try and keep it going. Might have the odd evening where I'll just have a sandwich or something, but most times I'm cooking a meal.
Okay, so I'm Stuart. I've been living on my own for a very, very long time, and I'm still working age, so life gets really hectic sometimes professionally. And I think I've been someone who slipped into that habit of relying on ready meals, and it got so easy to do that. And I know that's not always necessarily the healthiest thing to do, and it would be nice to just have some kind of skill so I could cook for friends from time to time and not feel embarrassed about my terrible cooking. Things can't always be explained terribly well in the written word, and sometimes you just need someone to show you something, and it just makes a bit more sense visually. It's perhaps also about getting into a routine of just doing it, and hopefully it might get me into better habits.
My name's Trevor, and I love to experiment with cooking. I'm a carer for my son. My son has interoception, which is a sensory issue. So it's just nice to be amongst other men sometimes, or other people, rather than being at home cooking by yourself or something. So it's a shared experience then.
My name is Ron. I'm 81. I met Robin through the Carers Association after my wife passed away. And we were married for 58 years. Didn't learn to cook anything when we were young. And so when I got married quite early. I was only just over 20 when I got married. So my wife did all the cooking and she didn't like me in the kitchen. So I was sort of starting from scratch, really. I didn't know really what was best to put in where. And it's been good for my mental capacity because I haven't got any relations that live close by at all. And so when you lose your partner, you just don't know really what to do with this. I mean, I wasn't really looking after myself food-wise very much. You might just have a sandwich, like Michael said sometimes, you just get so depressed. Coming here and meeting other people with similar circumstances. Robin has really helped all the people who come here. I just feel a lot healthier now with having a better diet. This has been really almost a lifesaver, really.
And finally, back to Cliff, who we heard at the beginning of the programme.
As a boy, it was in the 50s, it was very basic, but very wholesome. As I talked, my mum used to make peas pudding, and we used to cook some things nowadays you wouldn't like to see. I can remember going home sometimes and there'd be an ox tongue in the pot cooking. Goodness me, what's that? Lots of offal, liver and bacon, mashed potatoes. And you didn't waste it. They couldn't afford to throw it away. My dad was a taxi driver. Mum ran the house and she did the cooking. Things did change. The wives did go to work. So when my children were growing up, I can't say I did very much, but I certainly did a lot more than what my dad did because the society was changing. When my wife died, you're really depressed. Coming to these classes, and it helps you get through. Well, it never goes away, but the first few months are horrendous, and it helps you get through that. And my daughters, they can't believe that Dad cooks. They come up and they say, "Crumbs, Dad, have you done that? And you cooked that?" And, "Well, we're coming up for dinner. You're not coming down to us. We're coming to you." And that wouldn't have happened in the past, other than if my wife was doing the cooking. But she usually told me to clear off. I'm in the way. But now, it's my kitchen. Yeah.
missed you.
Season 2 of Julia, the Max original series about the life and times of culinary icon Julia Child, returns Thursday, November 16th. I'm Carrie Diamond, host of Dishing on Julia, the official companion podcast. Join me as I dish with the show's creators and creatives. Stream Julia on Max and listen to Dishing on Julia wherever you get your podcasts.